had felt that like not much of what they had said had been incorporated in the report. And you could see that reading the report, like it would say, this social worker said XYZ. And then there was they might have something from a survivor at the end, but it was almost like an afterthought. And like she basically said in the seminar, oh, well, we couldn't really incorporate what the survivors said because like it wasn't to the same kind of legal standard as the evidence that we got from the nuns and from the institutions. So they basically treated what authority figures and institutions and the church said as quote unquote evidence, and then the stuff that the survivors said about their experiences was just kind of, I don't know, a bit of colour or something. You know, that's almost how they treated it. You know, they're just treated it as not having the same standard at all. And it's the exact same thing they did with the Magdalene report before, where they just basically they structure it in such a way that they're saying they don't really believe survivors and that they're going to go with the kind of what the abusers, the perpetrators of abuse in this situation said, rather than what the victims and the survivors said. And she was asked like, oh, why did you do this? And like, kind of her explanation was that they were afraid of being sued, basically, by the church and the institutions, and therefore they had to be very careful in what they were saying. And then the other excuse was that it just would have taken too much time, you know, to check out what the survivors had said and incorporate it. And she was like, oh, that would have been loads of work.
God forbid.
You know, and like the survivors just, you know, completely outraged by this.
Imagine having to do your job, you know?
Yeah, do your job. It's just shocking. Like they only spend half of their budget as well. Like, have you ever heard of anything like this, like spending, you know, half of its budget? Like they didn't want to find out what the story was, clearly, you know? So like, it's just shocking, and it's really re-traumatized a lot of survivors, I think. But this definitely isn't the end of it. I think survivors are much more organized than they were, say, at the time of the Magdalene report, where they were able to successfully just bury that. Like a lot of the women were very old and just not in any kind of situation to be able to really be challenging it in a long way. Whereas a lot of the survivors in mother and baby homes are kind of younger because they were the babies in the homes, and, you know, they're fighting on behalf of themselves, you know, and their birth mothers and so on. So like I don't think this is going away for the government. It's going to be an issue for an ongoing time, I'd say.
It's so wild to me that, you know, that the commission only used half of its budget. That's so completely insane. Another huge glaring problem with that commission is the suggestion that no redress is owed to people, to women who were in the mother and baby homes after 1974, because that's when the lone mother or the unmarried mother allowance became a thing. That is also like that. I can't wrap my head around that. I really can't wrap my head around how anybody would think that is remotely appropriate.
I don't know, Diana. I know you had written it. We talked about an article before in terms of like ownership. A lot of health services is still under the nuns and the maternity orders. Do you see that this, like what you were saying about victims being more organised, and certainly what Brgid was saying about a higher level of distrust or like an inclination not for these orders to continue owning it? Is there any, like, where does this go from here? What is the plan? One, for the report, what Brgid was saying, are they seeking to just sweep this under the carpet, or is there something else that we can maybe hope on?
Yeah, like I think it's another of those situations where like the government and the whole state like are protecting like the old order, the kind of old way of things to the end, and moving as little as possible, you know. So, you know, they're still kind of covering up for the Catholic Church and their historical crimes against women, you know. They're trying to minimise the redress bill for the state and for the church by whitewashing this, you know, and just downplaying the central issue of like forced and illegal adoptions, and then trying to say, oh, there wasn't as much abuse as there was in industrial schools, you know, there wasn't as much physical or sexual abuse, or, you know, and it's all about reducing the bill and kind of, you know, playing it down and all that. And I think like, I don't think they realise the extent to which, you know, society and the working class as a whole have really been radicalised by the crimes of the Catholic Church, like from the sex abuse scandals to the denial of abortion rights, and how, like, you know, the equal marriage and the abortion referendum have just really pushed things forward, where, like, the vast majority of people are just like, this is outrageous. Of course the church and state should have to pay major redress for all this. Of course they should admit to everything that they've done. Like, I think your average person on the street believes the survivors, not this report, and not the whitewashed, sanitized version of history that's been given in this report. And I also think your average person in the street would say there's no way the nuns, the same order of nuns who ran a load of these mother and baby homes, should have any role in relation to the National Maternity Hospital. Like, it's just crazy and completely wrong. Similarly, I think they would also think that, you know, the church should not have any role in sex education of children in schools, but they still own 90% of primary schools, so they still control the sex education curriculum. And just there, like a few weeks ago, the Catholic Church published guidance about the new sex education curriculum that said that, we have to stick to, you know, the teaching that we've always had, that sex should only happen within marriage, you know. So basically what they're saying is, like, not alone should you not have sex outside marriage, you know, if you're straight, but if you're queer, if you're LGBT, you should never have sex, you know, you should be celibate, you know. I mean, it's just bonkers stuff. And, like, anyone can see it's completely backward. So I do think this is another situation where you've got this big kind of division between the establishment, the political class, who, like, still think it's okay to hand over the National Maternity Hospital and sex education to the Catholic Church, and, like, the vast majority of ordinary people who are just like, what? No, this can't happen. So I think they'll be dragged kicking and screaming towards more separation of church and state. But again, it's a thing they have to be pushed on, you know, from below constantly to actually make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a need to, like, I think, once again, get people active on this issue. And it seems like there is more, certainly. But just on ownership of medical services and things like that, if people are interested in more information on that, me and Dana did an episode in December, which I'll link below, on Ireland's permanent healthcare crisis. Just to move off, because there's obviously so much to pack into this week. It's been a while since we did a news panel. Moving on to what is the main event, and hopefully something a little bit more promising, is the Dublin Bay South by-election. So many would know that on April 27th, 2021, former Minister for Housing Owen Murphy resigned in Dáil Éireann to announce he would be leaving politics for something equally evil, but no doubt just as lucrative, international affairs. This has caused a by-election, which hasn't actually been called yet, but I imagine it'll be called next week, in which each of the parties have chosen their very best to stand, but in most cases that doesn't amount for very much. So before talking to what I think is probably the only good candidate in the race, we thought we'd take a look at what's on offer. And kicking us off is, I think, Diana, taking a look at Fine Gael's chosen one. So, Diana, who is James Geoghegan?
Indeed. He's a funny character in a sense that he's tried to run portraying himself as the exact opposite of what he actually is. Like, he was saying, I'm going to be a voice for the locked out generation and a progressive figure who supported repeal, whereas actually he owns, like, a really expensive house. He's from, like, 3 generations of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael royalty. His grandfather was a Fianna Fáil Minister for Justice. He left Fine Gael to set up Renua, which was set up on the basis of being like a right-wing anti-abortion rights version of Fine Gael, you know. So it's just bizarre that, like, he thinks nobody will find out about this. And also in his day job, he was a big tobacco lobbyist for years. So he's really almost like a cartoon villain in a way in this election, I think. But kind of more boring and less charismatic than a cartoon villain, you know.
I just like the idea of, like, this guy tying the working class to, like, a railroad track while, like, the train comes towards them, like, sitting, like, grasping his hands. Like,
Fine Gael just have, like, their whole PR thing is just to create one type of guy, and that type of guy is like the twee kind of Simon Harris affect, progress, like blue shirted, open top button, standing in parks, pictures with his family, all this sort of stuff. Like I'm so friendly and cuddly, but in reality, you only have to look like under the surface. But it is funny how they don't have any variety. It is all just like you're Simon Harris and you're Simon Harris and you're Simon Harris. I think that covers Gagan, and I think we should move on to the next starlet is Deirdre Conroy, who came on scene with a very funny video where they had all the Fianna Fáil reps like saying, "Who is it?" in like very I don't know, very dramatic effects, and then she speaks for like 2 seconds, and that's her promo video. But it has come out over the last while that her dark past as a landlord, where she had her own blog, where she kind of had some weird views in terms of foreign tenants. Like, she was asked in the blog, should I have foreign tenants? And she said, oh, well, it's actually best to stick with what you know, and stick with Irish people, basically. So it's a very progressive candidate from Fianna Fáil as well. But they have also been seeking to build her up as a progressive candidate by focusing on her credentials, on the fact that she instituted proceedings in 2002 in the European Court of Human Rights, objecting to the need to travel abroad for an abortion in the case of lethal fetal abnormality, which is, of course, like, that's a decent in the context of 2002, but extremely cynical for Fianna Fáil, given their role as the enforcer of the 8th Amendment through the years. Like, even at that time, her case was brought under a Fianna Fáil government, with Micheál Martin as Minister for Health opposing her, speaking out on the issue multiple times, but of course having that, like, change of heart or sitting on the fence in back during repeal. And that doesn't even get into the fact that the repeal legislation is still completely flawed. We're going to be doing an episode on this later in the month. But yeah, and this is under the government of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, despite other groups bringing this up.
Was it Conroy who was the one who, like, Harry Pottered her son or nephew or something like that by keeping him under the stairs? Like, I'm worried that she was more concerned about Death Eaters than the housing crisis at that point. Like, oh god, I can't believe I just made that joke.
Yeah, and then finally, I think that, like, worst of the worst three, anyway, in my view, is Labour's candidate, Ivana Basic.
Yeah, I think one thing about Basic, I actually got one of those targeted Facebook ads for her campaign just earlier on today, and it's old footage of her, in black and white footage of her in the 90s when she was a student, defying the laws and giving out abortion information, which obviously was good, but that was in the 90s. Like, there's a reason, like, why they're kind of foregrounding that, because, like, her record since even on abortion isn't that great, like, because she was in the Labour Party during a time period in which they were blocking bills that were put forward by the socialist left in the Dáil for a repeal referendum, you know. She was in the Labour Party when Labour were in government and were opposed to having a referendum on repeal. And also when they brought in the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act, which brought in the 14-year prison sentence for anyone procuring or helping, like, a woman to have an abortion or a woman having an abortion unless her life was in danger, you know, and she didn't leave the Labour Party over that, or, you know. So I think even on her one issue, like, she hasn't been the best. And then on everything else, her record is obviously even worse as a sort of a liberal feminist.
I think a big thing with all of this is that Labour are trying to rebrand themselves as being socialist, which, like, show me where Labour is socialist, and being pro-worker. But, like, at the end of the day, like, I mean, they're obvious. I mean, just take a look at their track record. I think if anybody from Labour is listening to this, just look at the way that they voted. Look at the way Labour has voted in the past, and then try to justify that they are pro-worker.
Yeah, I think there is there's a real attempt by all of these parties, especially. I think it's most striking with Labour, who poses themselves as left on certain issues, but it is a conscious endeavour for all of these parties to divorce the social from the economic and to talk about, oh, well, all these people have, all of our candidates have very positive views on social issues, so are now in favour of repeal, even though Gagan was not in the past, or are in favour, look at all these things that they've done on these grounds in the past, but are still pushing through the same economic agenda, which will target the most precarious in society and essentially establish the same model that we're going on that does so much damage. And I think it's quite clear with a few of them. But just to move on, I think given we've gone through the clown car of candidates, I think it's only right that we've chat with one of the good candidates in the race, Brgid. So this is a first-time campaign for you, and I guess just to start, like what got you active and what made you want to run?
Yeah, thank you for saying I'm a good candidate. I hope I am a good candidate. I'm going to say it. I'm a good candidate.
Yeah, exactly. To be confident.
What made me run, what made me kind of politically active was, I was always fairly politically engaged and politically active for like outside of party politics, like with repeal, with marriage ref. What kind of made my brain kind of engage into like I can't be apathetic about stuff anymore. I need to like actually get properly involved. Was the Debenhams picket. I was at that time, I had just been laid off because of COVID from my bartending job. That was an ordeal in and of itself. But I was seeing these workers who had really been hard done by, and really just abandoned and not even allowed protest at the early days. And it made me, I started going down to the pickets because I wanted to support them. They were, I thought that their struggle was fairly similar to my own. Not the same, but like all workers' struggles are workers' struggles, and you need to show solidarity. So me being down at the picket fairly regularly, I got to, you kind of get to know the other people who are also supporting the picket. And for the most part, the people who were down there were people before profit people, also Socialist Party people. And I decided that, like, I can't just like sit by and just like give out on Twitter. I can't be doing that anymore. I need to actually engage more. So then I joined People Before Profit. We made my membership in Dublin Bay South made it more apparent that there needed to be a branch for Ringsend. So we made a branch at Ringsend. I'm the convener of that. We were in need, Dublin Bay South was in need of a rep. I was, I have no children. I have no, aside from work and just kind of surviving, I don't have a lot of other, responsibilities. So I was like, I'll be the rep. That's grand. And then Owen Murphy resigned. And I was like, wow, okay, baptism of fire. I'm going to have to run. But I'm confident that I stand by people before profits policies. I'm not a landlord. I am not a tobacco lobbyist. So that's kind of what kind of got me engaged. That's why I'm running. I genuinely believe that there needs to be younger voices and voices that are used to precarious work, voices that can represent those people, voices that can represent renters. That's kind of why I'm running. I think I would be a good candidate. I think it could represent people who aren't currently represented. And yep, that's my little sound bit.
And like, what would you see as being like the big kind of issues locally, like in the constituency? Like, say, I know Dublin Bay South is often portrayed as being like this really rich constituency, but actually, it's a lot more like varied than that. Like, there's a lot more kind of normal people living in the constituency than you'd think from the way it's talked about. Like, so, like, what would you think are the more kind of local issues that are affecting people, like, and that you're going to take up in the campaign?
I think a big issue with Dublin Bay South is, that despite the fact that it's I think the richest is one of the richest constituencies in Ireland. It also has a huge amount of poverty, which people affected by poverty never seem to be represented by the TDs who are elected here. And, I think a lot of that is because of a fairly successful campaign to demoralise the working class in this area. 50% of people living in Dublin Bay South are renters, which is pretty high. That's extremely high. And again, they're not being represented currently in the Dáil. I think 32%, 31% of the TDs in the Dáil are landlords. So got to change that. I think a bit, for me anyway, a thing that I've been trying to focus on a lot is I think a massive issue that isn't being looked at is by the government parties is council housing and the absolute lack of maintenance going on in council housing. I'd say for most of my casework, people getting in contact with me and sharing issues that they have, it is council housing that is their main issue, and the fact that Dublin City Council has allowed a lot of this housing to just fall into disrepair, fall into decay, and just not maintaining it adequately, despite the fact that, okay, Leo says it's a free house. It's not a free house. You pay rent on a council house, and that rent goes towards the upkeep of the council housing, whether that's maintenance for a block of flats or maintenance for, a council house in and of itself. You're paying rent to go towards that, the same way that any renter is paying rent and should, and it's not the case, but should have repairs done immediately or in a timely manner when they needs be, because they're paying rent for not just to live in a house, but also to live in a house that's maintained. A lot of the inner city council housing is falling into disrepair, and the reason for that is because that land is worth millions and millions of euro, and Dublin City Council wants to clear out that land to sell off or to make, the usual story: hotels, empty offices, luxury apartments that nobody lives in, or like sell it to Google for them to make, accommodation. And the way to do it is to just neglect the council housing, allow it to get so bad that it needs to be condemned, move the people living there into the suburbs, and then demolishing everything and uprooting them from their communities, from their kids' schools, their jobs, just throwing their lives into disarray purely to make a little extra cash or appease Google or whatever their motives are. That's a huge thing that I'm concerned about, and it's a thing that I'm going to be focusing on. Another one is environmental issues, particularly what's going on in Dublin Bay with the Ringsend water treatment plant. Oh, I'm blue in the face talking about it. There's huge issues with the Ringsend water treatment plant. They treat a third of the country's wastewater, but are not able to keep up with it. Which is why they dump about 74 Olympic swimming pools of human effluent into the bay every month. It means that the bay is closed, or not the bay. It means that 1 in 5 swimmers become sick. It means that beaches get closed. It means a big thing that people forget is that Dublin Bay is actually a UNESCO biosphere. It's protected. It's a UNESCO protected biosphere, and it's also the only biosphere that contains a capital city within the EU. It's extremely unique. We have a lot of unique flora and fauna here, and they're in danger because of the amount of effluent that we just pour into the bay. There's huge algae growths. The smell in Ringsend is disgusting. It's quite bleak. And it's managed by, I'm going to use air quotes, it's managed because Irish Water manages it, air quotes. But they outsource a lot of their the work that needs to be done. They don't do adequate water. They don't adequately check the quality of the water. They do it once a week, and that's only during the bathing months, which is May to September, when the EPA has been telling us to do that daily, and they just don't do it. So we have no idea how bad the water actually is. We just have a snapshot of how bad the water is once a week, during the bathing months, which is, pretty bad. Notably, this is the constituency of Eamon Ryan, who was voted in because people were concerned about the environment, and he's essentially abandoned them. Surprise, surprise. Irish Water says they're not going to do anything until 2025. My position is that we don't have that long. And if people are getting sick, getting diarrhea, getting rashes from swimming in the water now, what's another 3-4 years going to do? It's just going to exacerbate the problem. And yeah, that's another big concern of mine. Also, general housing for everybody, housing for anybody who needs it. I'm just going to kind of wrap up because I know I've been talking for a long time. Sorry. But
no problem.
Yeah, apologies for that.
No, it's no problem. Rights. It really isn't. Yeah, there's a never-ending list of things that need to be covered and that are also not being considered by any of the parties or the vast majority of TDs that are in there. So yeah, absolutely.
I have more than 2 issues that I'm concerned about. Don't worry, folks. I have lots of issues.
So you've clearly highlighted how you're the best candidate in the area. So,
thank you so much.
So how can our listeners who would want to support you, how can they go about doing that? Is there a place they can donate, or is it a way to help canvassing, or
if you want to participate in some canvassing, I'd love some canvassers. We have quite a few. I've been really, really shocked about the amount of people who come out. If anybody wants to help with canvassing for my campaign, I'm not going to stop them. You can contact me via social media. My Twitter is Brgid Purcell, all one word. My Instagram is Brgid Purcell _PVP. My Facebook is Brgid Purcell PBP. I really should have thought about making them all the same, but I didn't, and now they're printed on a bunch of flyers, so I can't change it.
We'll link them. Everything will be linked anyway.
And we also have a PayPal that I will give you the link for. So if you want to contribute monetarily, by all means, I would also like that.
Yeah, it should be noted that PVP candidates often, we're not running with the backing of big business or the other parties, so absolutely great for people to contribute, and yeah, get out if you want to. We'll link up all of Brigid's things in the episode description. Anything else, Brgid? Do you want a last word? Or
register to vote. If you're renting and your vote's at home, that's no good to you. Register to vote. I don't care if your vote's in Cavan. Change it because you're not living in Cavan now. You're living in Dublin Bay South. So change your vote, have it down here, and do it in time. It's nice and easy. Just register to vote and then vote for me. Give me your number 1.
Yeah, that's the important part. Don't register if you're not going to vote for Brgid, but do register if you are. No, register anyway, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. If we should be... Are socialists obligated to tell people to vote? I don't know. Anyway, I think we should leave it there. This is a monster of an episode. We've covered quite a lot. And I guess I'll just say, so thanks a million, Owen and Diana, for joining me, and more than anything else, thanks a million, Brgid, for sitting down with us. It was an absolute pleasure, and we'd encourage everybody to get out and support. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye. Right, I'm going to finish that recording.
You wake up and your head's fucked. You stick your trousers on and your last bit of makeup. Your last coat button falls away, floating through life another day.